welcome to the channel, welcome to my chaos. I read a bunch of books in November and I would love to tell you about them. So I don't know why in November I mostly wanted to read about human depravity and murder, but that's where we are. The first book that I finished in November was The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. So this is a detective novel written by Agatha Christie, and the detective is Hercule Poirot, our favorite Belgian sasspot. The book is, however, narrated by a local physician who knows the murder victim and most of the people involved in the murder. And he and Poirot have some very interesting discussions about who they think did it. I don't want to get too much into the plot of this because it's a very classic detective novel. So if you read it now, having read a lot of mysteries, you'll probably recognize what's going on relatively quickly. This is probably the first detective novel that I actually solved before the reveal. Not very soon before the reveal, to be fair. I usually don't try to solve mysteries because I prefer just kind of going along for the ride. But this one I found the solution relatively obvious because I've read some amount of mysteries in the past. I also maybe read this book when I was 10. I genuinely don't remember. I do really recommend it though, just in general, if you're at all interested in the detective mystery genre. It's short, it's funny, the audiobook is really nice. I listened to about half of the book and then read the other half, which is something I typically do, and I really enjoyed the audiobook narration. Really recommend that. It's very fun. The next book that I read, I absolutely loved, and this feels like a very controversial opinion because that book was Bunny by Mona Awad, and this book is unhinged. Like, it is so unhinged, and this was another audiobook that I listened to. I listened to it completely on audiobook, and oh my word, is it a story. So this is technically a dark academia novel, but it's like if Heathers was dark academia. So it stars a group of girls in a prestigious Master of Fine Arts program at a prestigious university. And one of the girls doesn't get along with the others because she's very not like other girls. That's our main character, Samantha. But eventually these other girls, who all affectionately call each other Bunny, decide to accept her and invite her in and have her be part of their extracurricular activities. And their extracurricular activities involve capturing animals, usually bunnies, turning them into men who don't have functioning hands and kind of like messed up faces and aren't very smart, and then murdering them. Very literal killing of your darlings. They do call these men darlings. So there's a lot of absurdist horror in this. There's a lot of like, how do I put it? People explode in this book. People literally explode in this book, but like they're not people. And there's different animals play a part, and they also get turned into these like pseudo-humans. And all of this is for the good of art and for the good of creating art. Our main character, Samantha, is torn between her loyalties towards these girls in the program who she almost like assimilates in them, in the point where they're like a hive mind and she has no independent thoughts. It's very culty. And then she's pulled in a different direction by a hinted towards possibly too intimate relationship with one of her past teachers, who she calls the Lion, and also pulled towards a roommate slash friend who she is relatively clearly in love with, who is always described as being very swan-like. So there's a lot of this like animal imagery, and there's a lot of this internal conflict, and really we follow our main character as she loses and finds herself and loses and finds herself, and her reality melts around her. It's such a bizarre book. Like, I finished it and I was like, I loved this and I can't tell you why. I just absolutely, I thought it was so fun. The journey was so enjoyable. I found myself laughing out loud at things I should not be laughing at. So I recommend this book if you like absurd horror, things like Heathers or Scream Queens, stuff like that, that have these like sorority cult vibes almost. If you don't mind books where you have no idea what's going on but are still very entertained, And if you have a tendency to laugh at things that you probably shouldn't be laughing at. It's really funny. It's a really funny book, 5 stars. I remained in this like disturbing vein, and after that I finished The Discomfort of Evening. The discomfort of reading this book. This book, I felt it viscerally in my soul, in a way that I can't decide if it's good or bad. I don't know how I feel about this book. I gave it a 2.5 stars rounded up. It's both amazing and terrible. Like, it's been a month since I finished this book and I haven't made up my mind. So what is it about? It follows a young teenage girl. I think she's supposed to be about 12, 13, but she conceptualizes the world more like a 5 or 6-year-old. She's very emotionally and intellectually stunted due to the extreme isolation and neglect that she and her siblings experience on their little Dutch farm. So their parents are really religious and really neglectful and completely emotionally shut down and ignore the kids when their, I want to say, oldest son falls through the ice and dies suddenly. And our main character thinks that she caused that to happen, and she and the other children do not know how to process their grief or how to process puberty or how to process being ostracized by other kids at school who clearly like are living in the modern world. Like, this book is very strange because you feel like you're, for a lot of the book you think it's set in like the 1800s or something, but then things like Walkman are present. Like, it's actually I think set in the late 90s or early 2000s, but it really doesn't read that way, and the main character really doesn't seem to be living in a modern day. This book is extremely disturbing, like content warning for literally everything, because terrible things happen. Especially a lot of like sexual violence towards children perpetuated by children, and lots of animal cruelty that's like very, very vivid. Like, I had to put the book down a couple of times during some of those scenes because they were pretty messed up, pretty harrowing. But here's the thing, it seems to still have a point. So I was pretty conflicted while reading this book because part of me didn't want to finish it, but then at the same time I was reading it and I'm like, there's something interesting in how this is being explored. There's something interesting in how the pain and neglect that these kids are feeling, and it's coming out in these horrible ways, but it like forces you to pay attention to their emotional turmoil. I still don't know if that's the best way to potentially maybe portray that, maybe not, but I don't know, this book left a really strong impression on me. Like, it is seared into my brain. So even though I didn't give it that high of a rating, I would potentially recommend it, but only if you have an extremely strong stomach. That said, if you like movies like, I always forget his last name, but the Greek director Yorgos something, who directed Dogtooth and The Lobster and Killing of a Sacred Deer, if you like that kind of like messed up, weirdly violent, but also emotionally stunted, but in an interesting way, I really recommend this. This is like, this book has the same vibe as those movies. And if you like this book, I recommend those movies, because this is really messed up. So then I was like, okay, 2 disturbing books down, let's get another one. Let's get Poison for Breakfast. I say this tongue-in-cheek because Poison for Breakfast is a middle grade novel by Lemony Snicket, our adored Lemony Snicket, author of A Series of Unfortunate Events. And it's a little novella, and it's so sweet. And I just really like the way he writes. So this is an entirely true novella. Everything is factual. And it opens up with our main character, Lemony Snicket, narrating, and he finds a note that says, "You had poison for breakfast." And he panics, and he starts itemizing what he had for breakfast. Now, I would read Lemony Snicket's grocery list, so an itemized version of his breakfast items, close enough. I read it, I think, 15 different times in this novella. It's always there. And then he goes to check the source of all of these things. So where did he get his eggs? Where did he get his water that he made tea with? Where did he get his honey? And tries to find where the poison could have potentially come from. And along the way, he has adventures, he muses on philosophical concepts, he meets people, he has these reflections. It's truly charming and truly enjoyable. It's a delightful little read, and like if you're really nostalgic for a series of unfortunate events and you miss Lemony Snicket's voice, this book is such a little like golden nugget for that. It's absolutely delightful. So I don't know why the vibe for November was like, let's go disturbing book after disturbing book after disturbing or dark. I was just feeling darkness and murder, and so here's a book of murder I love. A Flicker in the Dark, which is about murder. Specifically, it's about a woman who, when she was a teenager, her father got arrested and imprisoned for life for murdering a bunch of teenage girls her age, basically. And to cope with that, she became a therapist for girls of that age. And what catalyzes the start of the book is that now, as an adult, as a practicing therapist, girls around the same age are going missing, and it's girls she's interacted with in some way. One of them is a patient of hers, one of them is linked to her in another way that I don't want to spoil, but maybe I should spoil it because this book was inherently really bad. So it's been really highly praised. I hated it. It still got a 2 stars from me, like a 1.5 rounded up, because it wasn't the worst book I've ever read. Like, my threshold for a 1-star thriller is The Silent Patient, which I hated with every fiber of my being. This did not piss me off as much as The Silent Patient did, but it was really annoying. The writing in general was very, like, stiff, is the best way I can put it. It was just not very organic. It didn't flow in any interesting ways. It was easy to read. I think I read the book in under 24 hours, but it was really annoying to read. So I was almost reading it hoping that something would happen, that it would get better. And then it would have these amazing gems, like our main character is saying that after she gets her PhD, she'll get her master's. And not to be a snob, it's hard sometimes when you have a PhD and you know about these things to not be a snob about it, to just be like, but no, that's like someone saying that they'll get their middle school degree after finishing high school. No, unless it's a master's in something completely unrelated and you're trying to change fields. This like doesn't make sense, and already the book was grating on me, and this is just like such a small tiny detail that just shows that something's off about the general writing of the book. And then there were so many really weird red herrings and really weird plot twists that I was just not about. So by the end of the book, I felt more frustrated than anything. And I wasn't like quite sure how to articulate my feelings. But I can usually tell how I feel about a book because I then go on the Goodreads page to read either the 5-star reviews or the 1-star reviews. Those are the ones I start looking for to see what resonates with me more. And the 1-star reviews for this book were on point. I recommend scrolling through them. Anyway, I would recommend this book to a specific group of people. And I mean this in the kindest way possible because I do think that while it was not for me, it's a book that can very much be entertaining and be enjoyed by other people. So if you liked The Silent Patient, I did not, but if you did, this might be up your alley. So I was then very happy when I picked up Empire of Pain. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this, again, disturbing. So disturbing. But it's true. So Empire of Pain follows 100 years of the Sackler family legacy. So starting with Arthur Sackler, the main patriarch, the oldest of the 3 Sackler brothers, who started with nothing, became a doctor and an entrepreneur, and had a lot of influence over pharmaceuticals for treating basically anything. So he had a part to play in the distribution of Valium, and he and his family had a huge part to play in the distribution of OxyContin. So effectively, this family is allegedly, inadvertently, technically, you can make up your mind about this, responsible for the opioid crisis. Largely due to very shady marketing techniques and a lot of familial greed. The reason I really loved this book, and the reason I recommend to listen to it on audiobook, is it's read by the author. And the author is an investigative journalist. So he took great care and put in a world of labor, like an absurd amount of work, into interviewing everyone he could get his hands on. He interviews like people who knew the Sacklers like 50 years ago, like secretaries, delivery men, custodians, gardeners, all these kinds of people who would have this internal knowledge and who would be flies on the wall, as well as like business partners and patients slash clients. Just, he builds this really rich tapestry. And this is a mild spoiler, but I do want to say that he was threatened, allegedly threatened, into not writing this book. And he attempted several times to get direct quotes from the Sacklers, and they refused to meet with him. This book is such an expose, and it's incredible. I could not recommend this higher. Just if you have any interest in like science ethics or medicine ethics, or if you wonder, hey, why is it a problem for, you know, pharmacy companies to take doctors golfing? This book. All the like ethics, morality stuff that exists around like how pharmaceuticals companies should be treating doctors and how they should be advertising stuff to patients, you will see that a lot of the ethic rules that we're now taught and that are super common in medicine and pharma are a direct result of a lot of actions of one specific familial and business dynasty. I cannot recommend this highly enough. If you're not into nonfiction, this reads like a crime novel, and it reads like a really good crime novel. Highly recommend it. So I needed a detox after this. I needed a little bit of a cleanse, and I am a big fan of the late Ray Bradbury's prose. The Discord book club that I'm a part of, my friends, ended up voting to read this as one of the novellas for last month. So this book was The Halloween Tree, and it's such just like a sweet little whimsical autumnal story by Ray Bradbury. And my library had the audiobook, but it had the theater, like radio play adaptation of the audiobook. So I'm a little disappointed because I didn't get to like hear some of the really nice prose. A lot of the book was faithful to the text. I double checked against some text excerpts I could find online, but it was still adapted and pared down. However, the radio play was really cute. It felt like watching a Disney movie. It had songs. So there's songs in this novella that just follows like a group of boys as they talk about the history and spirit of Halloween and how Halloween is celebrated all over the world. So it definitely had this like wholesome apple pie vibe to it. It was a cozy thing to listen to while spending an evening. I won't lie, it was largely forgettable, but I think if you're looking for a little bit of like children's whimsy and enjoy Disney movies, this honestly would probably be up your alley. The next book that I finished was the first book I've annotated in years and years, so check out all my little annotations here. This was The Cat Who Saved Books, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I think I'm going to make a separate video just talking about this book and going through some of my annotations because I had a blast and it was so hard not to annotate everything. So this book is about a young boy whose grandfather owns a used bookstore. And when his grandfather dies, the young boy doesn't really know what to do. So he's about 16, 17. He's a teenager in Japan. And one day he's just hanging out at the bookstore because he hasn't been going to school. He's just really like ridden with grief. And a talking cat comes to the bookstore and tells him, hey, I need your help. So the cat then takes him on an adventure to go see various people trying to meet their Goodreads goals. That's not what happens, but that's essentially what happens. This whole book is a criticism of the commodification of literature, and I thought it was really cool. So the book is structured a lot like The Little Prince. So this idea of a duo, occasional trio, going around and visiting different people who have fallen who are like caricatures of a certain vice and who need to be shown the errors of their way. That is entirely what happens. So we visit one person, then we visit another, then we visit another, and then we face an internal battle within ourselves. It was really good. I rated this 5 stars. The prose was really beautiful. Like, some of these passages are absolutely gorgeous. Like I said, I think I'll make a separate video that if I do make it, I will make sure to link it here. Because there's so many nice annotations. But let's flip to a random one. So the way I did my annotations is that if it's more pink, it's more emotional, more blue, it's more relevant to the structure of the book, and yellow made me laugh out loud. So here's one I found hilarious. I just wrote, called out. You're done after reading them once? You don't want to reread? Reread them? Are you an idiot? Haven't you been listening to anything I said? I'm too busy reading new books. It's already difficult enough to reach my monthly quota. I've never felt called out the way I did in the first little bit there. But this is really lovely. So if you want to change your relationship with books, if you want to reevaluate your relationship with reading books or think about them as beautiful mystical objects that they are, this is a great way to have that journey. I had so much fun with this one, 5 stars. This next one was a nonfiction pick by the Goodreads Discord Book Club, specifically picked by one of the mods, Pizza. Hi Pizza, I promised you a shout out. Hi, I love you. And this book was Underland. Oh my god, this was so cool. So I don't know how to summarize this book because conceptually it's very strange. It's let's explore the world under our feet, or the world that's hidden, the world that we don't know. So the author, who I believe is an English professor, some kind of humanities professor in the UK, he goes on these journeys to talk to various experts about the Underland. So he goes into like the catacombs and the underground city of Paris that is explored by like cavers and that the people above ground are completely unaware of. He meets Merlin Sheldrake, the author of Entangled Life, and the fungal expert who tells him all about fungi under the forest floors. He goes to various like physics labs that are deep in the earth, including like astrophysics labs that can only get like the correct darkness and the correct angle to explore deep space by being underground. He goes into icebergs, like underground into icebergs. There's a lot of like this like cave spelunking stuff going on, and there's a lot of mythos being explored, there's a lot of science being explored. This book is a journey into the underground, which is not a world I've thought a lot about. I've thought about like the deep sea and how much of it is unexplored, but it never occurred to me how much of the deep earth is unexplored, or how little we know about it. If that interests you, this is stellar. This is absolutely stellar. And this was another book that I half listened to and half read. And I definitely recommend having some physical version of it because there's these really cool photos of the things he's talking about. That said, the writing is so evocative and so narrative and lyrical and beautiful that this is just scrumptious. I did end up only giving this 4 stars because it felt a little bit incohesive. So what I did like about it, but also what I didn't like about it, is each chapter kind of explored its own thing, but it made it less, it felt like a random grab bag. Because the narrator really like stayed in Europe, while he mentioned other underlands from other continents and other civilizations, I feel like the scope that the book said it had wasn't the scope that it actually had, and it didn't dig deep enough into all the stuff. So it felt more like a sampler board than a full exploration of the Underland. That's why I ended up giving it only 4 stars. I say only though, this book was wonderful and it's definitely made me want to read more of his writing. So I do recommend it if you're into science, if you're into the underground. And yeah, it was really good. It was really good. And thank you again for the recommendation, Pizza. I really enjoyed reading this, along with you and the other members of the Discord. Oh, I have a prop for this next one. Hold on. Okay, I'm back with my prop. So the other novella that the Discord had recommended and that I ended up reading, well, listening to actually, and it's a middle grade novella, so this was a very, very quick read, but it was Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes. So this is the story of a little Japanese girl who was a baby when the bomb was dropped in Hiroshima, and when she is a little older, around like grade 4 or 5, she suddenly develops leukemia, which is kind of known as the bomb disease. And she finds out about this myth that if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, you will be cured of basically all your illnesses. So as she's battling leukemia, she folds paper cranes, and her brother helps her, her classmates help her. She doesn't end up finishing the paper cranes. Apologies if that's a spoiler, but her classmates after her death do. And she becomes the symbol of hope and resilience and also peace. So this book made me bawl my eyes out. We went to Japan in November of 2019, so it was the last international trip that I did because I haven't traveled outside of Canada since the start of the pandemic. And we got to go to Hiroshima for a day, and we saw the museum, and then we also saw the memorial. So at the museum and the memorial, I did pick up this little ceramic paper crane, and it's just it's so delicate and so beautiful. So this flew with me. Well, I carried it with me through the rest of our trip to Japan and then home to Montreal. And this is based on Sadako's story. So I found out a little bit about it when I was in Hiroshima, and then reading it a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, just bawled my eyes out. It was just really sad. It was really sad and really touching. And then in general, if you ever have the opportunity to go, please go to that museum. It is such a good testament to the horrors of atomic bombs and radiation and nuclear war. It's extremely moving. So this book really just reminded me of that experience. It reminded me of this little thing. So I got to have a little cry. Sometimes books need to make us have a little cry. So if you feel like a little cry from a children's book, pick this one up. And then there's a book that I was hoping would give me a little cry. But the thing with Celeste Ng's book is I think I like them in theory but not in practice. So I was saying at my November TBR that I think I enjoyed her other books more than I let myself enjoy them. But I think it's actually the opposite. I wanted to like them more than I did. And that's how I feel about Our Missing Hearts. I gave this 3 stars because it had all the right elements. I saw a Jack Edwards short recently about this book that was like, it had all the right ingredients, but then she forgot to cook them. It's like you got given the ingredients, but they weren't mixed. And I feel like that's a really apt description for what happens in this book. So it's a very short book that tries to explore a lot of very big concepts. So it explores anti-Asian hate primarily, and I thought it actually did that in a really good way. I do enjoy dystopian writing. I don't mind tropes in dystopian writing as long as they're done right, and I think it was done right here. So the sort of political landscape, I think, was done very well. But then the book, within a very short amount of pages, tried to explore the sort of state-mandated anti-Asian hate that resulted from an unspecified economic collapse that was somehow remedied after the Patriotic Americans Act was enacted, which didn't really make sense. And then there was this backdrop of a broken family where the mother was of Chinese descent, the father was white, and the boy, the young, like, preteen boy, was mixed, and his mother had left them to protect him, effectively, because his mother was thought to be this, like, really big anti-government activist, and anti-government activists have their children taken away. So this book, like, explored so many themes. It explored the idea of children being separated from their parents as a political tool. It explored government oppression. It explored choosing between your family and causes you believe in. It explored having to grow up too fast, or how to have underground resistance networks, or how do you draw people's attention to causes they're not affected by. A lot of these really good things, but yet something still remains feeling kind of like half-baked. It's so hard to put into words. It's like it was, so much was packed into this book that it didn't give me the depth that I wanted. I'm looking at my Goodreads review and it makes me laugh. It had all the elements I usually enjoy. Political unrest told as a family drama? Yes, please. The importance of words? Give me. Unconventional activism and la vie bohème? Please. I love that. I love that so much. And yet something just felt off for me. So the balance of some of these themes felt really wrong, and then some of the choices the characters made felt so illogical and confusing and sort of inorganic. I think that is probably what bothered me the most. Like I said, the world building was really good. And the way that Margaret, the mother, told Bird, her son, about the political unrest before his birth reminded me a lot of the way my Polish parents would talk to me about what 80s occupied Poland was like. And it felt very realistic and very reminiscent of something I've experienced before, I guess. So I would still recommend it, but primarily if you don't mind there not being like a lot of plot, being this very big backdrop, and if you're not sick of dystopias. Because if you're sick of dystopias, this may not be the right book for you. So another heart book that I also gave 3 stars to is My Heart is a Chainsaw. Okay, so my enjoyment of this book skyrocketed when I switched from reading it digitally to listening to it. Because Stephen Graham Jones's writing style is extremely conversational, and a lot of his descriptions of action are very indirect. So the sentences will kind of like meander around what is happening and imply what is happening more than actually describe it. And that works super, super well out loud, but my brain is unable to parse it when it's written down. So if you find that you've never been able to get into a Stephen Graham Jones book, try the audiobook. So overall, this book was really good. I really liked the main character of Jade, who's a teenage indigenous girl who is obsessed with slashers. Like, she literally spends, for her history class, she writes extra credit reports analyzing slasher movies and analyzing, like, slasher character tropes and stuff, which is, like, absurd, but her teacher's really nice and lets her do it, and you get to read these essays. So she becomes convinced with the fact that there is going to be an active slasher in her hometown, and she needs to prepare the final girl for her role as the final girl. And she knows that the police won't help, because the police never help until it's too late. It was really enjoyable. I think it was just such a cool concept, and I think it was executed really well. I don't think I'm the right audience for this. I'm not super huge into slashers, and I felt it a little... I think the storytelling was like a little bit detached, which might be maybe like the way slashers are. I'm a fan of comedy slashers, but not true slashers, if that makes sense. Like, I'll enjoy Scream, but I don't think I'm a Halloween kind of person. So, while I wasn't the right audience for this book, which is part of the reason why I give it a lower rating, I do think that the book masterfully does what it set out to do. So I would recommend it if this sounds up your alley. I think it's a really cool reading experience. I've never read anything like this. The only thing that comes close is The Only Good Indians. And I think what's really cool with Stephen Graham Jones being Indigenous is he writes Indigenous characters who are way more there than their indigeneity, while also integrating that. I will probably read more Stephen Graham Jones. I still think that he and I should just remain friends and probably see other people. He's not a 5-star writer for me, but I really enjoyed this. Oh, you know what movies this reminds me of? The Lighthouse and The Witch. Both of these were movies that I thought I would like, but then just there was something off about them that just didn't speak to me, but I understand why other people like them. That's exactly how I feel about this book. It's like objectively, artistically, it's very good. It just doesn't resonate with me, but I can see how it resonates with other people. And the last thing I'm going to talk about are my 2 DNFs. Neil Gaiman and I were best friends when I was in high school. Have I outgrown him? I don't know. Did I read this book 10 years ago and forget about it? I also don't know. Also, I think it came out in 2015, but it feels like it came out way longer. I'm DNFing this. I got to a Sherlock Holmes story, and there's just something about Sherlock Holmes fanfiction that I can't. I can try, but I can't do it. So it's a no for me. Sorry. I might get back to you, we'll see. And then the other book I very regretfully DNF'd was The Marrow, Thieves. So this book I thought was going to be so cool. It was a post-apocalyptic novel, or like a dystopian novel where most individuals have ceased to have the ability to dream, and the only individuals who can still dream are indigenous people of North America, and they're being hunted by their bone marrow because people can regain the ability to dream through bone marrow transplants. I really wanted to like this book, and I got through about a quarter of it, but the writing was so geared towards children who are far younger than me. It was a lot of tell not show. It was a lot of like, there are 8 people with us. The twins, the older girl who's sassy, the older boy who's sassy, the young girl we must protect at all cost, the little baby we've been taking care of, the wise grandpa who's leading our troop. It was just that vibe of like, characters are only archetypes and nothing more. There were hints at a romance that was going to be like really forced, and just, it was very, it read like the summary of the book that I wanted to read rather than the actual book, if that makes sense. There was just no development on anything. Things moved way, way, way too fast. It was all plot. If you want a really quick book, I would recommend this because it's actually very easy to read. It's super, super easy to read, but I just wasn't getting anything out of it. And I've been trying to be more generous with myself with DNFing stuff. So this was an act of self-care, and I was like, you know what? We're gonna put this away. We're gonna put this away, return it to the library. Hopefully it finds the right audience, because I know people have enjoyed it. This just was not for me. So those were all the books that I read in November. Really disturbing, really great. Honestly, I had several 5-star books this month, so I have nothing to complain about. I have been in a little bit of a reading slump. I don't think I've finished a book in over a week now, but we're getting back on the horse, hopefully. We'll get back on the horse and not just watch it gallop away into the sunset. Thanks so much for watching. If you like books, so do I. You can find out more about the books that I'm reading on my channel. Light yourself a candle, have yourself a wonderful day, pet a cat, do a craft. That's what I'm gonna do. This is my craft. That's my cat. Bye friends. It's been fun.